Yes, Alice. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Good morning for you also.
So let's see, is it early morning?
Yeah, it's 9 in the morning. Well, not
Oh,
early
nine
morning,
in the
but
morning.
He is from
Okay,
Eastern
9
EST.
a.m.
yeah.
Okay.
What time is it out there?
For me, 8.
8. Oh, okay, okay.
For CST, it is 8 a.m. in the morning. In India, it is 7:30 in evening.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, it's 9 a.m. Canada time, Ontario. Yeah, it is the EST EDT. I again missed out on sending that UK time. I will update the table. I'll just now publish it.
So in those people you are in the group, I can understand that you guys have lots of confusion and you have lots of things to ask. But it's sorry for us because this is a free session and we have a limited resource allotted for our internship program. So if you have any question, doubt, like is it a totally free initiative or not, uh, it is a right place you can ask all of your doubts, all of your question, technical, non-technical, whatever you have. And those people are, right now trying to start their career early. Please remember one thing in IT industry, it is like a you should always communicate. Communication is the key. Shan, are you there? Can you do you have any question? Because I can see your hand again. So don't
Hi, ma'am.
hesitate if you have any question.
Yeah, please.
Hi,
Please, anyone
Karthik.
is having any questions from previous session or anything related to cybersecurity or job related options, please let us know before we could start. And we'll clear those doubts and questions and then we'll start the session today. I see there is one question related to SOC analyst role and the emerging of AI technology. Uh, I think SOC is going to be first place where AI is going to, start affecting or going to be used more predominantly in the cybersecurity framework, right? So one of the main problems what we face in a SOC environment is that we see a lot of false positives, right? So alerts are generated by the security controls, even when there is no attack or anything. That kind of a thing is getting uh, the showing it as attack, and people, there are more people out there to verify that it is not an attack and there is a false positive out there. So alert was generated for no reason at all. AI is being designed to do this activity, right? So reduce the false positive. So AI may not directly replace what SOC analysts would do, initially at least, but it is going to reduce the number of people required for that. That's something we think is going to happen because number of false positive goes down significantly. Uh, it is going to require less number of people to work on the SOC location. At the same time, it is also going to affect the data analytics part of the SOC also, because when you take all the logs and do a correlation and things like that, there's a lot of requirement, even though it occurs, right? Before data analytics, big data analytics came into play, a normal analytics would take about 40 days to do for a large network. But after big data came, it took about 40 minutes, right? So, but even now, even though it takes less time to do, but you have to tell the model what to do and what to look for that. It cannot adapt how it is going to search for the information. So AI is going to help us with that part. So these are two locations that is going to be there. Yeah. So Sean is asking, what's the roadmap of cybersecurity like? It's a lot of things to learn, or can you explain what to learn first? More importantly, can you explain which field in cybersecurity is sustained in AI era? Um, One of the fields that is going to be sustainable in AI era is going to be pen testing as well as DevSecOps, right? Because in a penetration testing environment, what we see is that for an infrastructure level, see if we look at our main course, we don't focus much on infrastructure level because a lot of the vulnerabilities that can be identified by the latest scanners, and these scanners are also supported by AI nowadays to make it scanning more efficient. But still, there are a lot of things that it cannot do, like authentication, authorization, functional level testing that needs to be there, right? Looking at the what is the behavior of an application, and then modifying your testing according to that. So when there's a commonality, when there's the same thing is happening for all the application, those things can be automated and you can get AI into that. But things that is going to be unique for that thing, because every functionality need to be tested. So in that case, AI is going to take some time for that to get pen testing as a road. It's going to be there, and DevSecOps also. Okay. From and what I mean perspective is from DevSecOps, you're going to be relied more on the design phase of it, right? The point of having DevSecOps is to start security in earlier stage, the design phase itself. Getting an AI to do that particular part, it is going to take some time because we have to look at the model and things like that. It is much more easier to come up with that particular process, I think so. At the same time, you have to think from an AI perspective is that, see, intelligence, there is, I think we had done long last time AI as well. A chimpanzee or a parrot is also going to have an intelligence, and human is also going to have an intelligence, and human also there are multiple levels of intelligence. Einstein intelligence is different, and normal dumb people intelligence is just is different, things like that. It's AI is not that it can do everything. AI can only learn better, can get improved only when it is used, when it gets more data sets. All right. So that is the thing. I personally think these are the two fields that is going to be there. And I also feel in the coming years, DevSecOps is going to become mandatory for every developer that is going to come into. Just like DevOps is nowadays is a mandatory. Any developer who is not having an understanding of a DevOps environment is at a disadvantage. And we are seeing people are asking now DevSecOps components out there. These two things will help you out because it covers quite a broad amount of things. Right. So that is when every team will require some way of doing it out. Right. But other fields, that will take time. And IoT testing, and people a lot of talk about it. There's a lot of money in IoT testing. The problem is it is a very, very niche market. Uh, it did not blow up as much as people thought it will grow. There's still a lot of adaptation that is required out there. So it is there, but again, the cost of learning IoT is very expensive, right? The topics and logics may be very simple, but the tool set that is required for IoT, even some basic scanning via Bluetooth scanners. Wi-Fi scanners are expensive, but Bluetooth scanners usually used for IoT communication that are even more expensive, right? So on an offensive way, the Bluetooth scans are a bit different. So that are the things that comes into play. Initially, I would start off with the roadmap kind of a thing. Understand basics of cybersecurity. I don't tell people to go with certifications of things, but certification syllabuses are a very good place to start, right? I would suggest go with Security Plus. What is the syllabus? Go through the content of it. If you think that is interesting, then probably you can take it up. Also Linux, if you are someone who's going to be hands-on, check out Linux Red Hat certifications, RHCSA and RHCE. There you'll understand that you are capable or not, what is your ability. Can you continue with that and things like that. Yeah. Uh, that gives you a very good idea. And also some amount of development work will help you. And none of this Red Hat certification. For you to learn the concepts, it is cheap. It is available on the internet. It's almost free. If you want to learn a little bit of web development and small projects, W3 Schools is great. And that would be a good place to start off with, for a career path in cybersecurity. I think Ishan's question, I think Menon will make. Sorry.
Now, Ishan, you have asked like, good evening, sir. Can you refer my profile to IT companies? Ishan, are you based out of India or somewhere else? But unfortunately, our consulting firm is based out of US. We don't have any direct consulting firm or job placement firm in India. So the answer will be no. But we can guide you how you can, get how to navigate this job market to get the job very quickly. Now remember, to get a job uh, is having like a 5 or 6 steps. First, choose a job role. Don't make your career for a tool based profile, because today we are using one tools in industry. Tomorrow this tool will be replaced with some other tools. So try to prepare your skills on a domain specific, and those domains are very new and have a lots of potential to grow for future, like AI, cybersecurity, cloud, DevOps, like that, right? Second one, create your profile very good with thoroughly. Get some certification, because certification will only attract few more recruiter. Do your LinkedIn profile very thoroughly. Find some endorsement from your, if you are in college, from your teacher, trainer, or colleagues, whomever. Fourth point is build the good connections. Try to join few webinar like this with some other vendor as well, so you can communicate with multiple people, and please try to talk, not chat, so you can communicate and touch with them, or like have a touch base with them. The fourth the next phase will be start marketing. Now first like wherever and whatever job you find, apply it, because it will give you what, first taste bud, like how or a kind of mock first couple of things. Once in every interview you'll find that the next interview you are doing little bit better. Once you have this kind of upskillment, you are more than ready. You don't need any reference or for your job.
Shan, I think a little bit of knowledge would be good, but DSA is not required. Okay, DSA is not required for cybersecurity. Little bit of programming skill will help. Yeah, but more important from a Linux perspective, it makes it more important out there. I feel rather than programming, if you have better knowledge in Linux or operating system like Windows, it will help. Again, it is going to be a learning process, right? So that is that to start off with. DSA, I think probably is data structures algorithm. So basically talks about algorithms that can be used to make the programming language more efficient. Yeah. That basically, yeah. Yeah. Probably we can start.
I think we can start.
Here we can start. So today is the final session for current cycle of DevSecOps, and we'll be going through, usually we have 4 weeks, and this time we had one middle uh, week for practical hands-on as well for the firewall and some related stuff. So we have extended by a week, and today class also we are likely to look at cloud security, and if you have time, we'll look at some practical part our component as well. We'll see how to use SSH and things like that in a real time. So what are the security hardening processes for the process that we look into that? Yeah. So the thing about cybersecurity is that whenever any security component we are supposed to give, it is always almost important to understand what is the underlying technology, right? If I want to provide or secure my Linux service, understanding how Linux works, what are the different services that are running on the Linux server, it is important to know. Without that, you'll be doing copy and paste. It does not make sense much of it anyway. In a similar situation for doing web application, understanding how a web server communicates, how a programming language works and things like that, it is going to be very useful. If you know how to do programming, that is even more better because it gives you a much more capable of doing a better testing of their identify vulnerabilities. In fact, the top bug bounty programmers, so pen testers out there, all come from a developer background. They have been working in development for 10 to 15 years. Then they identify, they got introduced to cybersecurity and they grew really fast in terms of pen testing. In a similar way, when we are providing cybersecurity solution for computing, cloud computing, it is important for us to understand what is cloud computing, right? So what do you mean by cloud computing? In a simple term, you can tell is that someone else's computer, right? So for instance, let's say I will have my desktop set up and give access to someone else, and I'll charge them for using my desktop via the internet. They're connecting to my desktop via any desk or any other tool to connect to my system and run whatever the program they want to run, mainly because they may be running a small laptop which is not capable of running. And that is what in a very bare minimum perspective, we call a cloud computing. But cloud computing is not that simple. When you go at an enterprise level, there's a lot of things that is happening out there, right? The virtualization is very in place, an important component out there. There's so many services that are being catered around. One of the main reasons cloud computing is a huge hit is that the cost of coming to the market or starting your own company cloud computing brings down significantly. Right? Let's say if you want to launch your own website and you want to have your own server for that, it can be very expensive. On a bare minimum, you're looking somewhere around, if you're in US, it will cost about $4,000 to $5,000. There are certain servers. The processor itself for the server will cost you around $10,000, right? 10,000 to 15,000. And some servers will have two processors in them, and everything can go up to. There are computers which can go up to $50 to $60,000 for a single server, for based on that. So in those kind of a situation, cost of introduction, because you need to have a office space, you need to hire a technician, all those things will add to the introduction. So you cannot start company somewhere there. But with the cloud computing, you are able to you can start off your own IT and start off your own services right from someone's garage or in a small office space or someone from your house. Okay. So there's, you might have seen in Devasis sir, webinar, what is cloud computing in much more detail. What are the different components, as a service, as computing as a service, storage as a service, database as a service. All those things comes into play, right? But one of the questions you have to ask is that who is going to be responsible for providing the security in a cloud environment, right? Is the user responsible or the cloud provider responsible? Meaning, let's say you have an EC2 instance in the Amazon. Are you responsible for securing that server, or the Amazon is responsible for securing the server? That is what is important. But for us to understand who is responsible, it depends on the what kind of a model we are running at, right? Cloud can be divided into three types of services: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. Infrastructure as a service, what happens is that the entire infrastructure, like meaning the client will technically will have physical access to the server, and then based on that, it is going to be there. They can manage their own uh, operating system services they are running. All those things are going to be managed out there. Platform as a service is predominantly what you can see, what we see technically see in AWS, like in EC2 instance and all those things that come as a platform as a service, meaning I don't have access to the underlying hardware, meaning I don't have access to the server, physical server, what operating system it is running, right? I'm not talking about a virtual operating system. I'm talking about the host operating system that is present out there. And there are a lot of other things that are running. I don't have any access for that. I only have access to my virtual machine. I can make modification and things that is how it is going to go, right? And the third one is software as a service. So software as a service is predominantly a Google Suite or Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Suite, that what we get out there, Office 365, that is called as a software as a service, because you don't have access to the server, physical server. You don't have the access to the underlying virtual machines also. Only thing you can access is the software, right? So that is actually this, everything is running under a cloud environment that is taken care by the underlying cloud provider. For instance, as you take care of your Office 365 needs, and GCP take care of your, your Google Suite needs. That is how G Suite needs, that is going to be there. Infrastructure is where we see very little, it happens a lot of times. I've been testing in some cases where a particular bank, there was a huge server farm with about almost 40,000 servers there. In that 40,000 servers, a particular banking client had about 20 physical servers. They had physical access to the underlying infrastructure. That happens quite rare. 90%, I think if you see, most of them will be platform as a service or a software as a service. So based on these three criteria, it is going to depend on who is going to be responsible for what. In infrastructure as a service, the client is mostly responsible. They are going to give some kind of physical security. Apart from that, it is the client's responsibility to give security, meaning the underlying host operating system, the virtual machines, all those things are managed by the client in infrastructure as a service. So all those things are supposed to be secured by them itself. So the provider takes less of a security responsibility in infrastructure as a service. Whereas in platform as a service, it is bit more evens out, right? So because underlying hardware, underlying host operating system and other things, network and everything are taken care by the cloud provider. On top of it, the virtual services that is been given, that has been taken care by the client out there, right? Whereas in software as a service, it's very, very limited. For instance, when you're running a G Suite or a Gmail, your office, email service is connected to Gmail services. So at those time, everything taken care by the Gmail itself. The Google will take care of that. Only thing you're going to focus there is that providing the software services like making sure using a good quality password and things like that is running in a proper way and things. So very little input is required for that. That's the advantage of having it.
Sir, sorry for the interruption, but
Yeah.
I want. Mustafa, can you turn off your camera? Hello.
Mustafa Adams, can you turn off your camera? Thanks. I think it came back on. So this is where we we can see a much more detailed distribution of responsibilities. Like in physical security.
Just a minute, Karthik. Actually, the thing is, if somebody turns on the camera, what happens?
Okay.
It interferes with the quality of the video.
Okay, fine.
So that's the reason we. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mustafa. Thank you a lot.
No, I had to remove him. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry for that. Sorry, Karthik, you can please continue.
Yeah, thank you very much. Right. So here the data classification, we can see different types of data and we see who is responsible for what in a different environment. When we're talking about on-premise, you can see everything is responsible of the cloud customer, that is a user itself, meaning they're having a physical server on their office space and physical security and everything has to be taken care by them itself. Right. So here, what do you mean by physical security? Physical security meaning someone who can come and access the server in a physical way has to be secure. There should be guards out there and we should have a proper mechanism for doing and things like that. In fact, the server farms for the cloud, where they will have thousands or sometimes even it will reach a million servers out there or infrastructure out there. The physical security there will be much more stringent than most army bases out there, right? So there will be under 24/7 surveillance, you'll be seeing a lot of high quality security guards guarding the infrastructure and the premises out there, and it's not going to be easy for someone to do that. And I've been to one of those locations. It takes a lot. There's always one person who is following you around. You have to give your identity information. They do a background verification check before you could reach the info. There a lot. It's not going to be easy for that. So in an infrastructure as a service, in all for all type of infrastructure platform or the software as a service, physical security is the cloud provider's responsibility, right? The host infrastructure is infrastructure as a service, that is a physical server. That is going to be partial in information infrastructure. Whereas a PaaS and SaaS, it is going to be a cloud provider's responsibility. And network control also the same situation, right? PaaS and SaaS, the cloud provider is taking care of that. Whereas in network control here, you will have be more responsible because you'll be dealing with what kind of a network you're doing out there. And probably you'll be having your own firewalls set up out there, and that is going to be managed by. But it is from the application level control onwards where there is going to be more requirement from the customer perspective, right? When you're giving an application level control, the application may be running on an EC2 instance, that security is given, but at the application level, the security should be given, but that is managing users, credentials, and how is the authentication and authorization is happening. That has to be taken care by the cloud provider out here, right? And identity and access management is also very important, right? So that is again taken care by the partially for that. For instance, at an application level, identity management is taken care by the uh, cloud provider, cloud customers. Whereas when when we talk about management plane, when we're talking about who can have access to the your Amazon account, who can create instances, can manage instances, how do you authenticate them, how do you manage access for them, that can be taken care by the provider out there. Right, that is what is going to be there. But infrastructure as a service, that is responsibility of the customer itself. Right, client and endpoint protection, data classification and accountability, all those things are responsible of the cloud customers in the infrastructure as a service. And whereas in client and endpoint protection, platform as a service, endpoint is basically it is where you're running the application, the laptop, desktop that is going to be there. So that will not come as a platform, whereas in software as a service, there's some amount of security they can provide it by the cloud providers that is there. But data classification and accountability basically talks about logs. We can tell which data is more important, which is less important, right? Then who did what actions, all those things will always be responsible of the customers. It is not going to be provided by that part. So this is how predominantly in a cloud environment goes into play. Who is going to be responsible for that? And this is very much crucial to understand, because when you're working in a company and you may be managing, if you're working as a DevSecOps engineer, you may be running your instances completely on the cloud, right? And a lot of companies are doing the same thing out there. So at that time, you should know which are the things which is there in your control, which you should do, and which are the components are not under your control, because it will help you to manage things in a better way, right? So now, so you might be asking, okay, you told what is supposed to be done by what, and there is things which are done by the cloud provider we are not going to be bothered with, because it's their responsibility. They have to provide. They will be managed by governance, right? They are supposed to do activities in a particular way, and we are supposed to do those activities out there, right? So we're not going to focus on that, but we will focus today on components that we can manage. That is going to be part of our things. What can be done by cloud customers to secure their network, right? So we'll look into that next. So any questions in distribution of responsibilities? Who is responsible for what? One second. Any questions in that way? Right, okay, just 1 second. So one of the main security tools, right? What do we get when you're working with cloud is that security groups, right? We see this is the common factor. It may be a different name given in different cloud provider, but usually it is giving certain kind of an option out here. A security group will act as a virtual firewall for EC2 instance to control incoming and outgoing traffic, both inbound and outbound rules, control flow of traffic and traffic from your instance respectively, right? So here, basically what we're looking at is which packets are allowed and which packets are not allowed. And again, it will tell who can have access, who is not going to have access to that. And we can also control what is the ports that are going to be available out here, right? They focus more on whitelist in security group rather than focusing on blacklist. It is a better option to go. So difference in whitelist and blacklisting is that blacklisting will tell who is not supposed to have access, right? Whereas whitelisting will tell who can access it, right? So now what happens is that let's assume there are 10 guys, bad guys out there. So blacklisting will tell guy X is not supposed to be given access for that. But the problem with that is that remaining 9 guys will still have access for that, because if I want to block all those 10 guys, I have to write 10 different rules for all of them. And it is a nightmare managing the rules out there. So whitelisting, what it will do is that it will tell people who can access it, right? Let's say there are about 25 people, about 20 people are not supposed to access and only 5 people are supposed to access. We will give write a rule that these 5 people can access, the rest anyone cannot have access to that, right? It may be 100 or 1,000 people trying to access the network. They will not be able to access the instance except these 5 people. And that is the thing about whitelisting. We should always focus on whitelisting, right? So now let's think from an hacker's perspective, right? For me, I'm an hacker perspective. What is the most important, what I will tell is the holy grail. Let's say I'm giving an hacking, some client comes up to me and tell, can you check out my cybersecurity, security level in my company? Can you look into that? This is my cloud infrastructure. I want to see how secure it is, right? So what is that biggest hack I can do, right? So biggest hack out there for me will be the management plane, right? The interface, there will be one super admin guy who will have access to the dashboard of AWS, where he can launch any instances, where he can control which instances are created, which instances are deleted, which instances are stopped, and all those things can be done by this dashboard. For me, if I can gain access to this dashboard, it is the highest level of hack that I can do, right? So for that, it is almost very important that we should give a lot of importance to securing this. We should make sure not many people have access to the management plane. There's a proper, make sure that it is done in a proper way, right? Ensure there's a strong perimeter security for API gateways of web consoles, right? There are cases where we can tell that it can only be accessed from a particular IP, and without that particular IP, we'll not be able to have access for that. The API gateways that are being sent in from your cloud management plane should be secured as well, right? And whoever is going to have access for that, don't just rely on username and password. Make sure it to have a multi-factor authentication. Maybe an email-based OTP or maybe an SMS-based OTP. There's some other way of it, right? Use separate admin, super administrator, and day-to-day administrator account instead of root and primary account holders credentials. So now what it is asking is that make sure the admin users for the EC2 instance or any instances you're running are different. They will have a different username and password, and they have a different system. And the admin users for your dashboard are different. Don't combine both, because when you're combining both, let's say your EC2 instance admin credentials, instance credentials are compromised. If he is managing both at the super admin level as well, super admin level is also getting compromised as well. So we should not look into that perspective. We should try to divide and have more. That is what data classification is about. Understanding which is more secure and providing more security for that, which is less secure and providing less security for that. Because security is also expensive. We have to see which is more important and secure accordingly. The priority should be there. right? Infrastructure is also important, physical facilities, or how do you do into that, uh, what is the computer network utilization and things like that. Even though that EC2 instance that is there, you see, you might look, there is a simple server out there. A cloud provider is going to have a lot of hardware behind that. So one is the physical security. Second thing is that you do have a lot of perimeter based security, like a firewall will be there, which is going to protect, which is going to decide who's to allow and whom not to allow based on the rule set. There will also be IDPS, intrusion detection and prevention system, that will take into consideration, right? Uh, we need to have a deny default approach, meaning if you see any firewall nowadays, it is going to block all traffic coming from outside to inside unless until there's a rule specified out there. So that should be the port. Disable root access, integrate secure testing into image creation. So make sure there's no root access available for your instances, and also make sure the images that you are using is having a security checks on them as well. Meaning, whenever you're creating an EC2 instance, it is based on certain image, right? Always make sure you're developing that EC2 instance or creating your instances from the latest machines, right? So let's say, for instance, you're creating an Ubuntu. Don't try to create an instance out of a 2016 Ubuntu version image, right? Try to create from the latest one. What latest one is 24, and 20 and 22 version is also under support for some time. So you don't have to worry, but you make sure they are under support and they are passed, right? Um, Again, monitoring integrity and right. Always make sure the systems are updated up to there, and store logs for what are the activities that are there. And this is where your SOC comes into play. That logs need to be analyzed and checked for vulnerability that is going to be there, right? And again, make sure there is VPN communication is secure between the devices. That is a good way to go about it. Insecure interfaces and APIs, right? One of the reasons why we move into cloud environment is that we need to run different instances for different APIs out there. But what happens in most of the cases is that the cloud provider is giving a very good support for the underlying infrastructure, underlying operating system and everything. But when we are creating an API instance, API interaction with that, we don't give proper support for that, right? There are APIs which will require less amount of data, is not quality data, so we can go get away with the less secure. But certain times, certain APIs supposed to be secure, right? So what happened in one of the instances when we tried testing for an API is that it was sending data in a clear text. There is no encryption at all that was happening out there. And there is no authentication mechanism also, right? If someone is sending a request in a particular format, it is not checking whether the user is logged in or not. It is not checking whether the user, even though if the user is logged in, does he has access to that particular data, right? That is not being done out there. That is what session management basically is. Even after the user is logged out, the API is still servicing for that particular user, right? Insufficient input validation, the input, whatever the input I'm giving out there, it is not properly validating, right? And the APIs are not patched. They are using underlying software. Third-party tools are not updated. Any action activity that is happening, it is not properly logged. Okay, that is there. That is and third party only permissive access control, overly permissive access control, meaning they are giving not proper checks are being done out there, right? So it is not going to look into that pattern. So someone is logged in, it is not deviating. It is not every request is not checked whether that is coming from a secure source or not, right? Because there are certain cases it could change. It may not be a good idea out there. And lack of rate limiting. So meaning on an average, what it is observed is that if a particular desktop or a laptop or a mobile phone is sending a request to the API, it can send about 10 to 20 API requests in a minute. If it is going beyond that, the API is supposed to be blocking and telling it you have reached your limit. I will not service it. Wait for another 30-40 seconds. Then I'll service you again. If that is not there, this will result in a DDoS attack on those APIs. That is very much, you have to be very careful out there. Second thing is third-party resources. Third-party resources are something which is becoming an havoc out there, right? What happens is that when you're running certain services, you cannot entirely write code for your entire application or entire how the API is working. You might have to depend on third-party tools as there for doing certain activities, right? It could be jQuery or it could be React or anything, or Python or anything out there. Python and things like that will have a better secured control. They identify vulnerabilities more often and they are patched quite, so, constantly. We can keep on updating, because that is also sometimes we have to be on the edge, because certain times they may update a particular function in Python that is used in your programming language, and suddenly because of the security vulnerability they will stop supporting that, so your program will break. So you should be ready to overcome that situation. But if you go certain times, there will be certain small components that you may be using, right? You may be, let's say you're using some component which is converting your data into an Excel sheet. You may use a small tool out there. These are less supported tools where security vulnerabilities could be more, and it will take time for them to patch. So you may be using a third-party tool which is insecure, and this could lead to a hacker getting an access into that. And recently there was a one, okay, there was an zipping tool for used for compressing files in Linux, and that had a backdoor. So any application was running that tool was vulnerable, so they could have complete access over the system and things like that. So we always have to keep track of all the tools that we're using and have a regular check, is there any new security vulnerabilities, and update it as regularly as possible, right? And one more thing we have to look into, that is insecure software development. If you see, right, if you've seen in our previous engagements, previous sessions, we had spoken about in one of the sessions, a vulnerability can occur in three spaces. One is the configuration part. Second is the third-party vulnerabilities, which we saw earlier. The tools that may have, that is having to go. Third-party vulnerabilities, you can't do anything, right? You cannot make changes to that. We can only whether upgrade to a latest secure version, or I can stop using it. That's the only thing you can do. But the third and the most common place your vulnerabilities occur is in your coding itself, right? And this could happen because uh, not because developers are not, it's not like developers are dumb, they don't know. They are very intelligent, but the problem is that they don't know about the vulnerabilities. And the process they approach is also going to be, makes it more easier for hackers to gain access. And it takes more time for them to fix things as well, right? Um, so first thing is getting into DevOps environment, trying to look at the design phase itself, understand in a design phase itself, what is the vulnerabilities, what could the vulnerabilities that could be present out there, and then focus on those vulnerabilities and fix it. And rather than waiting for the application to be completed and then fixing it is going to be a big problem, right? So it could cost the company a lot, because the product is taking more time to come to the market, and the more days it takes to launch, delayed, it is going to lose money. CI/CD pipelines are a good place to start off nowadays. We can do a lot of scans. DevSecOps is developing quite good. We can be using all those things to make sure the data, the vulnerabilities are at the lowest, right? It is not that you're not going to have any vulnerabilities. You will have vulnerabilities, but it will significantly go down. Instead of having 30 or 40 vulnerabilities, probably you can bring it down to 3 to 4 low-level vulnerabilities. It is not going to affect the performance or the impact the security, right? That is there. There are also other tools provided by software security developers and cloud service providers, which can be used to check, improve your software development process and secure the development in a better way. That is one thing. But the most common thing we see is data securing at the at rest as well as in transit, right? So what does it mean? So data in transit is when the data is moving from the server to the, for instance, laptop or desktop, or from the desktop or laptop to the server. It is a to and fro. The reply and request is going to be there. That is transit. And when data is stored at the data in the hard drive of the server, that is called as a rest. So here, a lot of companies nowadays focus on encrypting the data in motion, meaning they're using HTTPS. That is what an HTTPS does. Secure your communication. It is going to encrypt all the data that is going to be there. But still, there are companies which are not doing it. And we are seeing this happening more in APIs nowadays because API way it communicates, it's a bit different to a traditional web application that is there. Even though they're doing that, in some cases, they are not encrypting the data on the hard drive at all. They might be storing it in plain text, and that could have a huge impact at the later stage. If your server gets hacked, if your data is encrypted, even though server is hacked, the attacker will not be able to decrypt the data and take something useful out of it. But if it is not encrypted, it is going to be someone taking your book and reading your book. That's how it's going to be. For instance, let's say if you're writing your information in a book in a coded practice, even if you lose your book to some enemy, they will not be able to understand what's the data. Yes, you have lost the data, but the data is not going to be disclosed to anyone. So that is the power of encryption that we see is there, right? That is one thing. And one more thing is accidental cloud disclosure, right? Uh, this is something we see. There are cases, there are S3 buckets where it's AW instance where they store data and information and things like that. They will forget the admin guy who's managing the AWS. They will forget to put that in a private mode. They will keep it in public mode. We have seen a lot of instances very what happened was it was one of the testing environments for a large credit company. This particular company is working with many different banks, and they work as the boutique, where the customer can come and decide which bank they want to go ahead with, and they will facilitate the process of loan provision of them. And the customer data is stored in a S3 bucket. So for the same process, what is happening is that they are having the S3 bucket for the main application, and there's a testing environment. The testing environment S3 bucket, that person has not secured it, but fortunately there is no relevant data. Customer data is not there, but it is having fake data. But still, even though there is no data breach, it gives out a lot of information about how the data is being stored, what are the different fields, what information they're collecting. It will give lot more data, raw data or metadata about the application. That should not be the case out there, right? So it is happening quite normal. There are certain small cases where we have seen that small companies, they're actually their data is available on everyone can access it because they forgot to share prevent their S3 bucket from going public. And it is very major issue. In one of the cases, we also saw the GitHub repository, which is supposed to be private. The entire application was made public, right? They are not aware of it. So meaning entire code of that particular website is available, and this is not small. They are doing a lot of business. There's a lot of information out there. There's no data loss or anything, but the code, source code of that application is disclosed, which is very important. That is an intellectual property. It is when we talk about vulnerability getting hacked, it is not always about customer data. That could be financial information. It is intellectual coding functionalities, how it is done. It could, those things are important as well, and that is a breach as well, right? So we actually had to go through the logs where exactly who is having access to that. Found out no one else apart from the company were using that particular GitHub, right? It was not breached, luckily, but we identified it. That was a major thing that comes into play, right? And unauthenticated resource sharing. This is very much similar to accidental disclosure, or you can tell third-party things and everything. Here it is same thing as it may be a virtual machine, storage buckets and databases. Uh, More than relevant people, irrelevant people who are not authorized also are able to access your instances, right? For instance, we are not locking the EC2 instances, telling that it should be accessed from a particular IP itself, or we can tell this has been supposed to geo-locking your application, telling that in certain cases, let's say if we talk about Saudi Arabia, they'll tell the certain application data should never go out of Saudi. That is what is important. Same thing is happening in a lot of countries are coming up with that. So on that time, geo-locking is not taking place. Someone else is able to access your resource even out of it, meaning the destination machine or the client where it is there. If it is outside that particular geolock location, it should not have access to that. So that is also we are looking into that part, unauthenticated. Then someone is able to access. I think this unauthenticated resource sharing happens a lot, right? Accidental cloud disclosure also comes into this, but unauthenticate comes in a much more bigger umbrella. It covers a lot more services on this. Okay. Right. The major problem in any cloud environment or any environment is that identity and access management, right? So who's the user? Who are the users that are there? And what access they do have, right? So because for instance, let's say you take any company, they might have different, every state might have a different opportunity database out there. Let's say we're talking about a regional manager should have only access to the data that belongs to his region, meaning a manager dealing with customer data for the California state should not have access to the customers in Texas, right? Unless until he's been authorized officially, right? That is what the process it is going to be there. And one of the places how to implement or segregate user management and telling who is having what access can be done using role-based access control. It's called as the RBAC in short form. It is going to make sure based on your role that what data can be accessed. For instance, if a user is assigned California manager a role, he can only access data that is belonging to the California. Similarly, a Texas manager role will only give a user access data to the Texas data. That is that. Always make sure, we are seeing any major recent attacks that is happening is because identity and access management are not done properly. The main intentions of doing phishing attack is to compromise this identity and access management, right? So a lot of time we do quite a lot. Recently, what happened was we were doing a phishing campaign for one of the companies, and the way we did it was it would try to force the user to enter their official credentials, right? Official credentials in that link. When they click on something, it takes them to somewhere, and from there it will take them to some other place, and we'll make them. It went on for a large organization, about 150 people are there. All of them received this phishing mail. It just took 2 people to click on the link. Right? Rest everyone they moved it to a bin and marked it as spam. but two of them clicked on it and entered the password, official password and username. You know, now we have an access to the username and password. That is more than sufficient. But it would be some way to protect under some kind of this is that to have a multi-factor authentication, meaning having an SMS or getting an email, OTP on your email or an SMS and things like that, or an Google or Microsoft Authenticator using for this process. Probably it will have a better, even though someone has entered their username and password in some website, the attacker cannot use this because they don't have access to the victim's email or mobile phone. Right? That is the reason being out there. That is something you have to be very careful with, and we have to always make sure multi-factor authentication is used, especially when you're having an admin privileges given to them. Okay, and if you remember, it's not when you see all major corporate companies, large companies provide their employees with iPhones. It is not that they want to show off their how rich they are and how good they are with their activities. The reason being for that is iPhone is considered to be better secure. Right? If they don't provide the employees with an iPhone which is secure in a way, it employees will not buy an expensive phone. They'll go for a cheaper phones for office purposes, which will have no security or less security, which could lead to getting compromised, even though it's going to be very, very, very difficult. Right? So that is the reason they give a good point of for that particular part on that. Right? Not only this, we are talking about so many things that is happening on the client level, right? But what about the laptops that we're giving for the customers, for employees that are there, or the desktops or the mobile phones? And mobile phone we just spoke, it is also important to secure the endpoints, and we should have a defense in depth approach to this part. We should see how can we use firewalls, anti-malware, intrusion detection, and access control. Uh, there are cases where nowadays the security is getting moved out there. You will need to have a particular software called as an agent installed in your systems, where it will give you a report of your system while requesting an access. Meaning, let's say you're having a laptop which is Windows is not updated, or your MacBook is not updated to the latest version, and you're not encrypted the hard drive, meaning in that case, it will tell I will not give access to the resource. Yeah, because it will tell your endpoint that is there is not of a sound security device. Make sure you have better security, then I will allow you to give access for that. That is how they're going about it nowadays. So the more and more you see, it is going to be more and more tracked. That is why corporate people will have two laptops, one for their personal and one for work environment. They no longer do personal things on corporate laptops because it is going to be heavily monitored. Right? Every website that you're going to use and things and all, that's going to be there. There are situations where employees are fired when they have used, for personal browsing, the company laptop for personal browsing and doing mischievous things on that. That is also there. That is important, right? Enable monitoring and security logs. This is something which a lot of companies don't work on, right? Especially small and medium companies struggle with this approach because this takes money, right? And small and medium companies, they have a very limited budget for IT itself, right? Forget about security. For IT itself, they'll have a limited budget, and adding security to that, it is going to stretch their IT budget for sure. So, but it affects them in a lot of ways in the long run. One instance you might have seen, I might have explained, told also, one of the companies identified they got hacked and they did, they had not been doing log analytics for a very long time. And they had better fortunes. They could invest more in their IT security. And they got to know they got hacked, and they got to know that they got hacked 4 years back. So they could not identify someone had hacked them 4 years back, and that person was continuing to gain access to their things and everything, and doing all the activities in the network, copying data, leaking the data to the competitors and everything. They were not able to do all of it because they did not have logs and they did not monitor the logs for any breaching events and things like that. So when they did the log analytics, they found they were hacked. But if that done earlier, they would have able to identify the attacker and prevented him getting information. And in fact, it affected them financially significantly also, because the hacker was logging into their network, copying a lot of intellectual data and selling it to the competitors. And this company was always thinking, how does my competitor know about the product? They would come up with the similar services, similar features, and they would launch ahead of this company, right? Because that hacker is getting all the,
Sorry.
yeah. Yes.
Yes. So does it mean that a database administrator or the backend engineer, they couldn't even be able to see if there's any form of penetration, external penetration in the backend logs? So there has to be some
Yes.
um
So yes, that what had happened is that they have not monitored the logs at all. So just the administrator was just doing his activity, creating user and managing and things and all. So they were not again storing the logs properly also for long-term usage. What happened was they started looking at which are the users that are being logging into the servers, and they started auditing which user belonged to physically which employee, right? Which ID belongs to do that. And when they did that log auditing, they saw that one particular ID did not belong to any of the employees, and that had an admin privilege out there. And when they saw that when that user was created, they got to know it was created 4 years back, and there is no information on that particular user at all. So that is how they were able to check it out. Right. So this is one of the places where there's an extreme negligence from the IT department, uh, that no one is monitored anything of that, right? In this situation, again, one more thing, what happens is that in a databases, if they have not done any secure installation, if you're whichever the user you're logged in, if you're logged in as a root user, that is again going to be, you can use it to log to the database also, right? If you've done a secure installation, that will not allow it. You need to have a separate user for the database. They might have not done it. At the same time, one more level of log we see in a SOC environment is any commands that are being run with the root privileges has to be logged, and even that was not done out there, right? So this is just one of the stories what I've heard. uh, One of the, I think this was information was given by, one of the FBI cybersecurity directors in one of the talk shows. I don't remember probably, but that is how it, way it was explained. There was an extreme negligence from their end. Is it fine? You want more clarification?
no, it's so fine. It's fine, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. See, one of the major things from an infrastructure perspective, right? Which we do both pen testing environment for web application, mobile application, and infrastructure servers and things. Predominantly, where we see a lot of problem is misconfiguration. This is basically for lack of knowledge, right? So usually what happens is that there is very severe shortage of skilled infrastructure admins that are there. And a lot of people who are there in the job, probably they are looking at Google, and they're looking at a checklist how to do a certain activity, and they're going about it, but they don't know where to look and what to be checked and not. They will not be able to understand that, right? And a lot of these times comes down to misconfiguration out there, lack of knowledge. Whatever we saw, storage buckets are getting leaked, APIs are not properly configured, certain ports are open, there's no encryption enabled out there. In some cases, even though the encryption is enabled, they wouldn't have enabled a high quality encryption standard. They would have enabled a low quality encryption standard. The most common we are seeing out there is from an HTTPS perspective, uh, the SSL 1, 2, and 3 version and TLS 1.0 and 1.1 is no longer supported. It should not be used, but we'll see that servers are enabled to support that older encryption standards also. That should not be done out there. And allowing a root configuration on a SSH server, or not properly configuring your firewall. In some cases, firewall is not enabled at all on the instance that is there, right? There may be security control, security group and things and all, but there should be some amount of, because security is always a multi-layered approach. Even though there is a perimeter firewall, we still need to have a firewall that is there on the server, which is providing some kind of security out there, right? That is important, right? So here is make sure personally configure. How do we overcome? Personally configure, buckets and stuff. Collaborate with development team, ensure that web cloud address setups are correct, right? How do you all those configurations? Ensure the default access are never used, right? Nowadays, this has a bit less impact compared to previously, because nowadays the defaults are more secure in some cases. But you have to make sure, check that is the case, right? For instance, if you see SSH root login is disabled by default in SSH nowadays. If you take a couple of years back, that was not the case. We had to manually disable it for that to happen out there. So that was one thing out there. But we have to make sure, right? Determine the user access level that are required and configure each bucket accordingly. Not only this, we have to determining is this has to be a periodic activity as well. There may be someone who is having access to your bucket. So let's say that person is no longer working for the employee company, or they moved on to another company. But have you disabled their user credentials, so that they don't have access to any of it? That has happened in some cases. We have seen, we've cross-checked and everything. Because in one of the companies, we went out there and they wanted to do an audit. So we told these are the people who are having access, how many of them are the employees and who is not part of it. We just were cross-checking and we saw that one person was still there. That person has left the organization a month back. But even though that person has not accessed it, we went through the logs to check what that was, that ID used or not. That was not the case. He has not used it, but still that is a security vulnerability that should not have occurred out there, right? So that is how we look into that. So these are all different things that we can do, right? Mandate company-wide training. This we usually do a phishing campaign just before a security awareness training, so people will be more, pro. They told okay, they were faced an attack and how they mitigated it, or they were a victim of that attack. That is there. Perimeter firewalls are not sufficient. Have a web application firewall, right? Monitor your thing. You implement a zero trust model. Zero trust model is basically you don't trust anything. Every request that is coming in, you have to make sure that goes to the proper security channel and check for that, right? Even though if the request is coming from the admin laptop only, let's say once the admin logs in the morning, it is not that he is not all the requests coming from that laptop is not going to be monitored for the rest of the day. That was the older way of doing it. Now we should make sure every request has to be, even in a 10 seconds, if there are 10 packets, all of them has to be checked for authentication, right? Regularly patch, which is always make sure that it is updated constantly. Use multi-factor using SMS, OTP or authenticator applications. Properly manage your identity management, right? Periodically identify and audit data buckets and their permissions, right? Always make sure who is having access to that part of things like that, and segregate also may be a good idea. If there are multiple projects in your company, make sure there are certain teams are different and the management plane, everything is different for all of them out there, right? And Always make sure the development cycle, look at vulnerabilities at an earlier stages. Don't wait till we reach the end of the application, then do pen testing, then understand what is happening out there. We should not wait for that. And also make sure SCA, software composition analysis, is how do you check whether your third-party tools are secure or not. And this is happening very well in CI/CD pipeline. We can automate it. We don't have to manually check. If we know how to do certain activities, we should be able to automate it. And once this can be run once in a week or once in a fortnight, anything more than that, it may not be a good idea, because you will, number of vulnerabilities identified every year is very high. As the time goes, it is increasing only, right? Lot of situations there will be what we call automation tools out there, but we need to understand where these automation tools are good, right? And we have to use it there and make sure these automation tools are up to date and don't give out, manage things properly. At the same time, also we have need to understand where these tools are weak and implement manual testing in that place, right? Uh, we can also use this nowadays. We are getting a compliance. A lot of companies get ISO 27. There are certain companies which are having automating this process, where automatically it will tell, let's say if an HR department is going to remove, or if someone is leaving an organization, HR department will flag that user accounts. It will automatically reach out to Gmail services and it will tell, please block user access to this, and it will other services that could be there. Everything it will be blocked. The Google Drive, Gmail, Docs, and everything will be remote access for that. That is how it goes. The automation tools, and it will make sure, and it will also do is that if I don't renew that particular permissions once in couple of months, it will automatically block those. That is a one thing, deny by default, rather than we have to manually deny out there. Right? And conduct pen testing and vulnerability assessment. That is common, we seen everywhere, but that has to be taken into consideration. Right? That's the best way solutions that we can do. It is always a multi-layer approach when we providing solutions in security, right? A lot of cloud providers are giving a lot of services nowadays. They do incorporate these services, but it is a good idea to use, rather than having a custom solution or you working on your own implementing it. Try to go with these services which are certified by these cloud providers. Sometimes they do give access to this third parties, but reach out to products or tools that are supported by a cloud provider. That will have a better impact. You'll have much more better way of managing security. That is permission to is your cloud provider out there. Yeah. Right. So that is it for cloud security. Some of the things that you can take into consideration when you're dealing with cloud security. Right. So any questions here? And one more thing, we'll take a 10 minutes break after the Q&A now. Then we are going to look into SSH, practical approach. What are the things that we need to consider? How to set up a keyless approach for hacking and prevent hacking on this services. All those things we'll see. But in the meantime, before doing that, please let me know any questions you have related to cloud security.
No, thank you, sir.
Anyone else?
I do have one question.
Yeah.
Like if you recently we got Deloitte, the cybersecurity expert, they got hacked. Now I think that does a big buzz in US market, and more of this company, if they are getting hacked very frequently, there is a it is actually a good sign for a particular job role that it will boost, right? And
Correct.
other company, they are also try to be little more careful and try to strengthen their workforce. Now, recent days, we are seeing some of the open source AI tools, some of the uh, small companies AI tools. They uh, asking, or they are telling that they are very secure, but the companies, you can check their whole revenue is very less, or it's not even maybe 10 or not more than 10 million, but they are promoting in such a way that they can boost your company's SDLC,
Yeah.
something like Copilot, but Copilot is from a very big brand, but they are from a small brand. Or they are also can boost your marketing through SEO or something, and for that you need to give them access on your website, so they can check the all the robot TX and metadata and everything. So what
Correct.
is your thought? Giving access with this AI things from a small companies or organization, is it a safe?
Again, it comes down to trust, right? We have to check out whether these small organizations are recognized by any standard body or things like that. For instance, a lot of tools that can come in cloud security or web application security. We see, for instance, for mobile testing, there's one tool called MobSF, mobile application security
Hmm.
framework. That is the MobSF. That is a free tool, completely used, but that is endorsed by WOWASP in the mobile testing guide. That you can use MobSF for using this kind of a tool out there. So look out for companies that are endorsed by standard, like Gartner is exposed, telling that these are the products that you can look into that. So certain amount of things out there, and check out what are the clientlets that they have already worked with, right? So cross
Okay.
check whether that is there. We need, because this is a trust matter. There is no guarantee that they will come and test. We will know that this is what is happening, that is what is missing, and they will do that part. That is not guarantee of the, because one of the customers we tested, the way they were working in a same, we knew about them. So we thought, let's have a small check on their infrastructure and things. When we did little bit of digging, a proper nothing hardcore or anything which is legally correct way to do it, we saw there are certain things that were there. If something is as simple as that, without doing any hardcore pen testing, we're able to identify. We thought we'll inform them that we thought your security may not be good enough, that we would suggest, get our services and help us out. They told no, we are already running a lot of scans, and which is advanced scan and things like that. And that was running from a very reputed organization as well, and they were paying good. So then the sales team had a discussion with them. They told, okay, we'll do the testing. If you don't find any critical or high vulnerabilities, we'll do it for free. Otherwise, you have to go pay for that if you find anything important. They told, okay, we showed them, we definitely think it's not that we're not simply trying to make money out of it. And then we did the testing manually, and we gave them a 70-page report for that. They were really shocked, really critical vulnerabilities, and GitHub was open, that was not identified, was publicly available. There was no DDoS protection or anything out there, and a lot of things, right? About 30 to 40 out of the 20 of them are high or critical vulnerabilities. And this coming from a regular normal source, uh, that is where I tell you have to check out where the data is coming from. Check whether it's coming from a regular, is this company is a reputed company and things like that. And then again, look at the client side and what is the reputation for that, reviews online for that. Without that, you are going to be their guinea pig for that. They are trusting their different approaches on your service, and that may not be a good idea to go.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, so Ishan is asking what are the tools that can be used. Ishan, from an when you're doing from a manual pen testing perspective, how would you know that you are running a attacking a cloud environment or a on-prem server, right? There's an IP address, there's a domain name. You don't know whether this website is running on your on-prem or cloud. Predominantly will not know. So most of the tools that is used in cloud are normal tools that we use in a normal pen test in a server and things like that. Authenticated scans, Nessus and things and all same thing. That's not going to be much difference. In certain situation, configuration management and things, there will be tools that are dedicated to that particular provider that we have to stick with that part. But from a pen testing perspective, most of the tools are same, not much difference. So anyone having any other question? Wisdom?
No.
We do use automation that can be used, and manual testing definitely that is going to be there. AI, what do you mean? Because AI is very new. A lot of people are talking AI, but what is AI out means out there? What is the level of intelligence is required, right? Even a 4-year kid will also have some level of intelligence out there, is able to do something out there. In a simple way, we can tell is difference between automation and AI is that if you take a washing machine in your home, that is an automation device, meaning it is taking the human activity of washing the clothes and doing it in a repeated format. It is able to do, right? That is an automation. In automation, I have to give each and every instruction, just like in a washing machine. I have to tell how long the washing cycle is going to be, what is the spin cycle, revolutions, RPM that's supposed to be, what is the detergent is an amount I'm going to take care of that, and what is the type of cloth that is I'm going to be putting in the washing machine, designing the which function that is there. All those things has to be done by me. Once all the input is given, that is been done. That is automation for, right? In AI perspective is that nowadays you're getting washing machine. When you put in the clothes, it will automatically decide how much clothes is there and it will dispense the right amount of detergent into that. In the future, we might get washing machines. It is going to take up a decision what cycle it is supposed to be. It will tell how much dirt is there, and then based on that it is going to change the cycle that is supposed to be there. It is using some form of intelligence based on the input that is going to be there, right? From an automation security scanning automation perspective, that is what it is going to be there. Based on that, there's some level of, but that is not going to affect from a security perspective. It's just that the scan results are going to be much more accurate. We can identify attacks much better. That is going to be there. We still need people to run those scans, analyze those scans, and they put that in a proper report and things and all. That is going to be there as well, right? That is something that's going. It is going to take some time for manual pen testing, for proper pen testing automation using AI. That is going to take time because there is a lot of ethics perspective. Because as a human, I can tell which URL is supposed to be. I might be working on a particular portal website. I can know which is the right URL I can test, and there may be certain links which are out of scope, and AI may not be able to differentiate. It might attack actual web server as well. So a lot of ethics is involved. So human interaction in in penetration testing will be there, and it is a good way. Otherwise, we should not allow it to be go unattended, unsupervised. AI needs to be supervised in testing, penetration testing especially. Right. We'll do one thing. We'll take a 2 minutes break, and then we'll come back with the SSH hands-on. We'll see how to configure and things from scratch. and we look at further things how it can be done. And we also look a little bit into cryptography, because how we are using cryptography for authentication is also we are going to take into consideration. Is it fine, Menon, if we take a 2 minutes break?
That is perfectly fine.
Okay.
Meanwhile, if you guys have any other question, any doubt, feel free to ask. And please remember, this is not a like a training session. It is a like a more or like a discussion session. So no question is like a stupid question or irrelevant question. You are most welcome to ask the question. While Mr. Karthik is taking break, let me give a heads up. Our DevOps classes is going to. So there are lots of confusion between our paid training, free training, internship. So please understand, we do have two training module. One is free training, that is every Saturday from first 2 hours for cybersecurity or AI. We have like 4 different coursework. And the next 2 hours, right now, the first 2 hours is cybersecurity and DevSecOps. Next 2 hours for DevOps and cloud. This is our free training or free internship. Yes, you will get a certificate if you join at least 70% of the live session. So then you will get this certificate for this particular free course or free training or free internship. Clear? Now, what is the purpose? Because this is will work as a test bed. There, as I think in the very beginning one of our joining, he asked like it is very confusing, like which field they should choose. What will be if they are really willing to go that field or not? Because some people they want to love coding. Some people they love operation. Some people they love to do analytics part. So these all of our these 4 course these free sessions, it will give you a test bed or you will find out that what is the all the domain about, what will be your day-to-day activity, how you can grab the job, what will be the market projections in next 10 years, 5 years, how you can navigate in the job market if you choose this particular field, and what is the level of difficulties you are going to face. Now, after that, we do have a paid training. That is a Monday to Friday, 5 days in a week. We have a morning batch, and morning batch means that is actually we call them Euro African batch because that is a good time for them. They can join. It is Indian evening, US morning, and Europe and Africa it is afternoon, late afternoon, around 5 o'clock. We also have a US evening batch, that is US morning batch. I think that is a midnight for Europe and Africa, so they cannot join. Very rare, few people join. So that is our paid training. Normally 6 to 7 weeks, daily 2 hours, 2.5 hours, Monday to Friday, 5 days in a week. Now, do you have any question on that to understand our offerings? Anyone? Good, perfect. Here, the free courses is the main objective is to give all of you have a holistic overview about that particular domain or specifically that particular job role. Now you can attend all of our free courses, DevOps, cybersecurity, AI, data analytics. Then you can choose, okay, this is my goal. I would like to build my career on this particular field. Good enough. Now you can, you can ask us that which, or platform we can go to learn. There are plenty free platform or you can learn, but it will take time. Or you can opt out our paid training. It's solely up to you. If you opt out our paid training, then our agenda will be to make you ready for that particular job role. And there's a reason we call those training as a job ready. So far now we have successfully landed people, more than 1800 people on this US job market. 1800 people within last 3 years. So the number is quite good. Now 60% they join. We have a separate plan for job placement plan. They went through that program and we're taking care of their job placement. 40% they got their job by themselves without anyone's help. If you have any question, feel free to ask. Okay,
Hello.
Karthik, I think you're back.
Yep.
Yes, somebody have some question. Yeah, Wisdom.
Yeah, I've not really heard about the job placement before. I'm just hearing about it. That is, after you are done with the program, there's another part that you can also join with your organization for the job placement.
I found little hard to understand your
Okay,
question.
I said the job placement you are talking about is different from the job ready training, or is part of it.
See, the problem now, there are 6 stages. We break it in 6 stages from starting to end landed on a job. The first thing is upskillment, to prepare yourself for that particular job role. So that is our job ready training. Now from there are so many students, like 30 to 40% students. They land on a job by themselves without taking help from us. We'll always work as a guide. We'll provide them that, okay, this is the way, that is the way. We provide the guidance as a free, as a at is our obligations kind of thing. But 60% students, they hire us to do their heavy lifting for job hunting, including what is the process, like their profile building, they are getting the certification, preparing the certification, set up the mock interview, and we also assign one bench recruiter. I think if you don't know, just search what is bench recruiter. Those, we do have very good marketing team, and they are working with US so many consulting firm, having tying up. So then we try to push these students internally through different companies as well. Nutshell, if you are after job training, you are more than ready for the job. Now your profile is your resume and your profile is on your laptop or desktop only. It should be rich to your recruiter or interviewer desk, right? Now once it's reaching, then along with your resume there are another 1,000 resume submitted. So your resume should be unique and some preferred, better to say. Those things we are taking care of. So suppose if you are, there are so many students who got the job without this program. Normally it's take 6 to 7 months based on right now's job market, because right now US job market is not too good last 2 years, right? Through our program, if they are looking for full-time position, it sometimes takes 2 to 3 months. Only thing, it is not like you cannot. Yes, without program, is this job training is more than enough to upskill your profile or your knowledge for this job role. But maybe you are very brilliant, but if your profile is not showing up in the right place at the right time, you're not getting the job, right?
Yes. And one more thing is that a lot of job roles don't come up on LinkedIn. It usually goes, they try to find candidates internally, meaning these companies will have tie-up with consultants and they will take out their resumes from them. Only when they don't find relevant resumes, they usually go to LinkedIn also, right? Because
Actually, that is the That is called profile building now, or profile connection. For an individual point of view, it is very hard to build that kind of amount of connections within a year. But for an enterprise level, it is very easy for us because we are in this consulting business last 4 or 5 years. We have placed so many people on their uh, projects, and thankfully, our most of our previous students, they have set up our benchmark over there. So it is very easy for us. And so, and some of their in a product based company, we are their only preferred vendor. So it is very easy for our students to place them directly over there.
Okay.
Very clear. Mr. Karthik,
Yeah.
thank you very much for the explanation. I do have a security question I want to ask.
Yeah, please. Okay.
In the place where I work in Nigeria, we have our own internal Wi-Fi that the organization, every staff subscribe to it, and they will give you username and password to log in anytime you get to the office to work.
Okay.
So my question is, most of the time, my colleagues that have access to my password, when I'm using it, they can still log in with the same password. What kind of vulnerability is that? Because I'm trying to get a clarification from my IT people. If I'm logging with my username and password to the Wi-Fi,
okay,
some of my colleagues that have access to it when I'm on the run, at that same time, they will just have to give me like 5 minutes or 7 minutes. They will log in with the same password and username. At the same time, we'll be using one single password and username to access the Wi-Fi.
So I think probably, yeah, I think probably I need a bit more information on that. So it could be possible that when you're communicating, when you're entering the username and password, the IT department has not put up a proper security out there. It may be running on HTTP. They may be possible for them to look into that, what your data packets are there. They can look into the what password you have entered out there. That could be there, or there could be some other shared approach where the password is getting stored. It may be disclosed to that, and it may not be done properly out there. So we have to look into a bit more detail into that perspective. So I don't know exactly how. So usually a better option for an enterprise level, what I would suggest for small or medium is to hide the SSID. So the user has to enter the SSID for it to connect. When you, for instance, when you click on the Wi-Fi signal, it will tell all the available Wi-Fi's. That should not occur out there. Then again, they can have a radius server where they can connect, there is not a standard password for everyone. For every user has to connect using their credentials, and every user credentials is going to be different. Before giving Wi-Fi access, that goes to that server, authenticates them, and then gives them the access of that. Probably you'll see in a lot of universities, students will have their own ID and password given out there, so they can connect to any Wi-Fi hotspot in the university with that ID and password. So we can track them, as well as don't have to share everyone the same username and password for that. That could be. Yeah.
Wisdom, I would like to tell one more clarification.
Okay.
For payments for our this job placement program, it is only available for our US students, frankly, because we don't have that much connection any other job market rather than US.
Okay.
Like even we are training institute based out of India, but as our consulting firm, and they are doing business last 3-4 years in US job market. So most our US job market is a strong forte. So even if you, after doing that training, if you need a guidance, we are going to give you a lots of like taking care of your resume, not like doing the resume. You will have a good number of resume template, and we always update our interview question and with answers in our job like website portal. So by which I told you 40% of their students, they secure their job. Okay.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's continue with the hands-on training for the SSH. I think there's a bit less time, but we still will do. There's a lot of things we can do out there. Let me share my screen. So predominantly what we're looking is we're going to look at SSH best practices. SSH basically talks about secure shell. So what do you mean by secure and what do you mean by shell? Shell is nothing but, in the simplest way, it is not an accurate, but simplest way we can talk about is command prompt in a Linux environment. In any operating system, it can be not only Windows, means it can be Windows as well, right? Where I'm sending any kind of a command. This is basically for people who don't know what is an SSH and things like that. What happens in an enterprise level is that your graphical user interface is not, recommended. The people who usually manage Linux server and things, they like to have much more hands-on, much more granular level control. That is kind of defeat the purpose. And when you have a text mode approach, right, text mode, where you can connect and enter the commands, that can be done using the text mode itself, and this process is called as a shell. So for instance, if you see me here, I'm using in this example for doing the hands-on lab out there, I'm using two machines. One is a Ubuntu machine and another is a Kali machine. And the Ubuntu machine is acting as a server here and Kali machine is acting as a client. So here you could see, you can see there's something called as a terminal. So I can click on it and I can enter commands in this part. Right. And so basically shell is nothing but a software or a tool that takes your commands and gives those commands to the kernel, and kernel is able to process that commands and give the output. Once again. And the output is going to be displayed on the terminal. So that is what this shell is basically is about. So now, usually nowadays, especially in a cloud environment, just a second, guys. Especially in a cloud environment, you will see that the admin guy is in a different location, most probably. Let's say, he may be in India and the server is there in US, right? I need to send the commands to the server to execute some kind of an activity, right? For instance, let's say I want to install Apache server before I could do. Then also I need to copy the code to this server out there. And for doing all these activities, I need to have a tool called as a remote shell. Remote shell helps you do this component out there, meaning I can connect from here to here and run commands out there. And one of the tools that is using is the two tools most commonly used. One is Telnet and SSH, right? Telnet is, there's no difference between a Telnet and an SSH. Only difference is Telnet is not secure. The reason it is not secure is that the data or the command that is sent in plain text, and anyone intercepting the packet will be able to read the data out that is there. Whereas in SSH, it is going to encrypt. And that data cannot be viewed by anyone in the middle. Right? There's no man in the middle attack out there. So it is very simple how to do and connect to that. Let's say I need the IP address or the domain name of the server. And we also need to know the username. not the user. For instance, Kali user, there is something like that. In Ubuntu, have a user called student, right? So how do we go into that part? Before we could go and see the services running out there, we have to see certain basic stuff that are present out there. For instance, SSH server is not installed on Ubuntu by default, right? We have to install it first, and only after that I'll be able to connect my server to remotely to the machine out there, right? Even though here both the server and client is present in the same system in my virtual environment. In reality, it can be anywhere in the world, as long as there is a routable path between the two devices, I should be able to communicate with that. So first and foremost, we will see how do we install SSH into the Ubuntu server, right? So how do we know whether it's working, it's there or not? We can do is system control status SSH. See, it is telling SSH service is not found because it is not installed. So if it is installed, it would give whether the service is running or disabled and things like that. That information will be given out there. So let's install. Command is very simple. Sudo apt install SSH, right? Along with SSH, I'm just going to install Vim. It is a text editor tool. It is not mandatory because we will be working on some configuration file. For that, I need that -y to approve and press enter. Enter the password for the student. Now you see, this is going to connect and install the SSH service for us. Okay. Submission sudo apt update. Let me update the status. Now I should be able to run the command secure. Okay. Some yes. This machine is not updated for some time, so some update process is running in the background. So now let's look at this. If we run the same command, system control status SSH. Now you see, instead of getting service not known, it is giving service is active and it is running. So this particular process is able to work. Okay. And which is the user I'm logged in as? I've logged in as user student out here. So now we told this is going to be the server and Kali Linux is going to be the client. So if I want to run commands on my Ubuntu server from Kali Linux, it's very simple. First, set up the connection using SSH. So here I'm going to do SSH followed by the option user at IP or domain, right? So that is what is supposed to be there. So for instance, we need to find out what is the IP address of Ubuntu. So let's say IPA The IP address is 192.168.178.129. So SSH command is very simple. SSH student at 192.168.178.129. And press enter. And you see for the first time when you're connecting, it is going to ask you for this. Are you sure? And I'm going to give S out there. And once done, it is asking for the student password. So when I enter the student password, it is allowing me to give access. And you can see that I've connected to the Ubuntu machine from my Kali client out here. So whatever things that I'm going to run here is going to be created out there. For instance, if I see in my current folder student home/student, if I create one folder mkdir1 and it is created, you can see that is created folder 1. And in this machine also, if I open that, you'll see that folder is created out here. Not only that, not only creating things like folders and things, I can also run installation commands as well, like sudo apt install Apache as well. Right? Press enter, enter the command. This will install the Apache server. And actually, when you go open here, a browser, and you give localhost, you will see the Apache server is installed. Right? You see that is going to, this is a default page. We're not doing anything fancy. I'm just giving an example out here. Right? So what are the certain things? So this provides a lot of command. One of our main requirements when we are pen testing or when we are hacking a server is that to able to get access to a shell. We should be able to run commands and things like that. And it's a major thing that needs to be secured. So what are the certain things that you will need to make sure this is secured out there, right? So I'll give one example is that it is a bad idea to allow root access to this machine. Okay. For instance, let's say Kali Linux will add Kali Linux as the server this situation. So you can see I've logged in as a root user. This is a very powerful user. You can do almost anything out there. You know, by default, this should not allow me to log in as a root user. I have config, and you have to make sure 144 is the IP address. If I give SSH, right? If I give SSH root at 192.168.178.144, did you see that? Okay, service may not be running. Right? So even though it is telling permission denied, this should be the scenario out there. You know, sometimes this will not be available out there. What you have to check out is that you have to check in the configuration file. So cd etc ssh, you have to go to this folder, then open permit root login, and yes. So what this is going to do is that it is going to allow me to log in as a root user. The main reason why we should not allow root login is they don't properly log root activities, and it has lot more power or capability. I can delete. There's nothing a root user cannot have access to. It can do anything in so much so capable that it can even make changes to the kernel itself. Right? Let me rerun it. Since I've restarted it, so it should allow me. Here it is allowing for that, and this should not be done out there. Okay. The reason why I'm doing it from Kali to Ubuntu in this situation is Ubuntu does not support root user by default. Okay, so that is the reason for that. So we'll go back to this folder again. Make sure remove the S component out here, and probably we should remove the comment it out there because by default behavior it will not allow root login. So now if I try to redo again, it will not going to allow me to do this activity, right? It's giving a permission denied process out there. So one more process that we can take into consideration here is that don't allow passwords. Don't allow passwords. What happens is that passwords can be broken easily, and it is not be a good idea to go with that process. But if you're telling, okay, Karthik, if I'm not going to have passwords, how can I log into that part? So usually for this, we are going to use the public key encryption to overcome this situation. Okay. So at that time, we need to create a public key and then able to set up the process for that. So usually what happens is that you see an algorithm like RSA algorithm. This is using an encryption algorithm. Whenever this particular algorithm is running, it will create two keys, key 1 and key 2. All your data is going to be encrypted using these two keys, right? So here, meaning you might be knowing there's something called as a public key. There's something called as a private key. See, how do we know which is a public key and private key? This algorithm will generate randomly two sets of keys. The one we are going to share with everyone is called as a public key, and one we don't share, it is a private key. In this situation, we are going to see how to do that particular component. The unique combination about this is that any message I'm encrypting using K1 can only be decrypted using K2, right? I can date the actual message only when I do that part, because I cannot use the same key to decrypt part. That is the RSA algorithm. So same thing for K2 as well. If I'm encrypting something with K2, can only be decrypted using K1. Not that, right? So that is the scenario for that particular process. So let's say for me to allow to have a key, passwordless login authentication to certain locations, I need to do certain things out there, right? So now what I'm going to do is that in the client, whichever the client that you are going to use to connect to the server, you're supposed to run a particular command, meaning I'm supposed to create a key for this place. So for instance, for that, for SSH, we are going to use SSH keygen, right? SSH keygen. -T is the which algorithm I'm going to use. I'm going to use RSA algorithm, and the block size, meaning what is the key size, 4096, right? So it is a good idea to have more than 1024. Okay, so it cannot be some random number. Okay, this has to be in a particular order. This is, you can see, right? The value can be between 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 5, 12, 1024, right? This is basically 2 to the power of n, to the power of 1, to the power of 2, and keeps on going. And now it goes to 2048 and 4096, right? It is no longer sufficient. You should never use an algorithm key size of 512. It is no longer secure. Always make sure the key size that I'm using for SSH, bare minimum should be 1024. It is still not recommended, but bare minimum it should be that. It can be either between 2048 or 4096. Okay, that should be the case. Let's do that same process. So I'm going to create 4096 out here. Sorry. SSH keygen -T. This is the RSA algorithm I'm using, and block size is 4096, and press enter. So here it is telling I'm going to create two sets of key. One is public key and one is private key, and that will be stored in this particular location. And this is the default location. So I'm going to give enter. If you want to change it and store it somewhere else, you can use it. You don't want to use it, enter passphrase here unless until it's really securely important. Normal operations, you don't have to do. Press enter out here. Then you'll see the key is generated for you, and this is the fingerprint. Okay, so now let's go to that folder, .ssh folder. And if you see here, there are two files out here, right? One is ID RSA and one is ID RSA pub. Okay, so this is my public key and this is ID RSA is my private key. Okay, so now if I want to access some server, right? If I want to access some server without entering the password, I need to push this public key into my servers. There's one file which is going to be called authorized keys out there. I need to push it there. Okay. This particular folder is going to be common for all Linux services, and Windows also it will be there, but the path is going to change a little bit. Right. That is what is going to be there. So if you see here, you see CD. If you give ls-la, you can see there's a hidden folder called SSH. I need to go into this folder. So give cd.ssh, get inside that. So if you give ls, you can see I have not created any password file, as a RSA files here. So there is no ID RSA pub is not there. But if you see here, there is one file called known host. So this is basically telling how many devices it has connected till now and which are the clients where it can connect to. So which are the servers it can connect to, and it will not ask you for permission. If you saw that this is the fingerprint, or sure you want to connect yes or no. If that information, this information is for the Kali Linux. So it will not ask me to and give me that question every time. Now it will directly give me the permission access to that particular thing out there. Right. So now, so you could see there's only two folders out here. I need to create one folder, one file called authorized keys, and I need to put that public key which I created here into this file. Right. And once I do that, I should be able to have access to this system easily. Okay. So now there are multiple ways of doing it. Sometimes people will create that file manually and then make permission changes, then add to that. Okay. So, but here we are going to use a very specific command called SSH copy ID, right? And we'll copy this particular ID RSA condition into that. So before we could push, let's see what is the content of that, This gives an idea that this is exactly the one that is getting out there. You can see here, this is just this, some random set of characters. The SSH program will know what to do with this information. This is nothing but your key that is supposed to be going out there. So now I'm going to give SSH, if you copy ID. Okay, then I'll give student at 192.168.178.129 and press enter. So it is asking for that file. What is the password for student? I'm going to enter the password. And you see, it is not sending any kind of a command or anything, no control command or anything. It is just copying the contents of my ID RSA file into the Ubuntu SSH folder. Previously, we saw there are only two files here. Now, if I do ls again, you'll see there's one more file called authorized keys, right? And if you see the content of it, you'll see this is exactly the ID RSA file content in my Kali Linux that is out there. So now, previously, what used to happen is whenever I give SSH student at 192.168.129, it used to ask me for password. Now, if I enter here, it is not asking me for the password. It is directly allowing me to give access to this. And that is how you go, and you're supposed to have this approach out there. Not only that, you should also disable password login into the SSH machines, right? So how do you do about that? Same way, go to Vim, go to that etc folder, SSH, then SSHD configuration file. In this configuration file, what you're supposed to do is come down, come all the way down. There should be C is there. It is called as a password authentication. And make sure it is no. Okay, and save it. Okay, this is happening because I did not use sudo, because this is a configuration file. I need to have sudo permission for this. Sudo. Let's come down again. Make the same modification. Password authentication. Make sure it is set to no. And save it. And let's say I'm going to system control restart. I need to restart the SSH service, and I will do it. Enter the password. Now it's working fine. So what I'm going to do is that now, how do I check whether it is only allowing via password, right? It is not allowing via thing out there. So what is going to happen is that, let's say, let me move the authorized file. I'll rename it to another file, right? Backup underscore backup. So it will not have this authorized file out there. So the SSH service does not have this file, so it will not be able to use the public key from this Kali server to authenticate it. Okay. Let me come out of this session. Clear it. I run the same thing again. It is telling permission denied because it is trying to communicate with public key, and public key here, it is not available out here because I just changed it. So because it is not, it is going to look for authorized key only. It is not look up a backup file or anything. The file name has to match exactly. So since it's changed, it is not able to access it. No. So we can do the same thing again here. Just get that file back. Right. And rerun the process here. Right. So this is going to log into me again with that. What happens? What happens? Let's say if I do this. Okay, now it should not be able to log in, right? So what happens if this configuration is not done? Right? If I give password authentication as yes, which is default, what is going to happen? It does not match. So what is going to happen here is, if the public key fails to communicate, what it is going to do is that it is going to ask for the password. So I did not restart the service. It is going to ask you to enter the password if the public keys are not matching, but this should not be done. Okay, it should never come back to password. We should always enable it, that it should not allow you to do this process. But you have to be careful when you're doing this. If you set up this configuration, the password permit password before pushing your public key, if you set up password permission permit password as no, you will technically log yourself out of the system, meaning you're going to brick your system. So make sure you push your public key into the machines first, and then you disable this option. Don't go first and disable it directly. You need to have that part. And again, always be careful, because one more thing is that, let's say, this is going to give me access for that, right? I'm going to give Control C. It is giving root access for that. Be careful. A lot of time what people will do is that they will run the SSH keygen command again. This will overwrite your existing key, it will actually block you again out of it. So you have to be careful with key generations also. Hold on to your keys. If you're generating in new keys, make sure you store your key somewhere else, or make sure you make modification the new key in every other location that's possible out there, right? This is something a very important concept, especially as an admin, you are managing many servers. You can't remember passwords for all the servers. It is better to have an authentication, private key, public key authentication mechanism for logging in, right? Sometimes in big data analytics, there will be thousands of clients, for instance, an Hadoop environment, they have tested, they told about 25,000 different servers were used when doing some data analytics at a big data level, right? At that time, all of these devices need to have an authentication done. You cannot have passwords at that time. Always make sure use and have this process of going from this way, you know. So that's it for practical part. In the future sessions, we'll add more practical into this, having less theory. But any questions from this topic from SSS perspective?
Wow, that was a really insightful and in-depth discussion. Thank you, Mr. Karthik.
Thank you, Manish. Thanks, man.
I think it will help lots of students. Though we are a little bit late for our DevOps session, which is already 17 minutes late. We're supposed to start our DevOps session 17 minutes before, but we no way we cannot stop, and we can skip uh, this hands-on session, because that is the very key things those students who have joined for cybersecurity, they should know. Now, before we move forward our DevOps session for today, we'll take another 2 or 3 minutes to, if you have any question regarding your cybersecurity or the previous session, let us know. If you don't have any question, then we'll move forward to with Mr. Devashish for our today's cybersecurity one. Sorry, our DevOps one. And thank you, Mr. Karthik, for your, I think, 2.5 hours awesome session for today.
Yeah, sorry, I took more time to finish it. We got
No,
extended, sorry.
you should not be sorry while you are doing something extraordinary. So, guys, do you have any question? Or we should end today's DevSecOps and cybersecurity session?
Hello, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, lad.
Yes, I want to ask about the authorization key. I don't know, I was lost. I'm trying to understand what you are trying to explain there. How to move your authorization key. Are you trying to say that we should from our that we should block how hacker can remotely use our private key or our public key to navigate into our own system? But I don't really understand the scenario there. I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to take you back. That is why I don't want to ask that question before, but I just feel that I should ask.
Yeah. So usually what happens is that when you're using, because this isn't proper hands-on session on how to implement it, but there's a tool called Hydra that can be used for brute forcing passwords. Okay. That will try out all the possible passwords that could be available out there and try to crack. So if there's no proper mechanism on the server for preventing any brute force attack, it would be possible for us to crack the SSH communication, right? So it is recommended that we should not use passwords in critical systems. I'm not telling you should not go with that all the time, but it is recommended for that part, right? But if you're going from a public key perspective of authentication, at that time we need to copy the whichever the client that wants to connect, its public key should be placed in the server. Well, so whenever there's a communication that is going to happen, there's something called as a challenge that is going to be done by the server towards the client, and it is going to encrypt your data, and then it is going to send, it will ask you to decrypt and send the data back. So there is a way of identifying whether the user is legitimate or not for that perspective. So when that happens, there is no need for the password to be used out there, right? Did it make sense, Larry? Yeah, Wisdom.
Yes, thank you very much for your explanation. My question that has to do with this SSH authorization now. The use of the RSA when you are doing your trying to generate the key, that SSH key gen, and ED 25519, which one is more recommended for security purpose? Which one is more stronger? Let me use that word.
Can you come again? Which you mean the key size?
Yeah, the key size when you are trying to SSH key gen, you use RSA, and
correct.
There was this I was in my learning process. The documentation I was reading was recommending that I should not use RSA, that I should use ED 25519 in trying to generate my keys.
So that I think EC will be electric curve out there. So usually it depends on what are the if there is something called as a non-repudiation, authentication and things functionality perspective that is available out there. What happens from an elliptic curve or Diffie element perspective is that it is less CPU intensive compared to RSA algorithm. So they would prefer using that. And usually we see elliptic curve and RSA algorithm from an HTTPS perspective, right? So same encryption standards are used for secure socket layer, that is HTTPS, as well as SSH perspective. From what I have seen from different locations, what they recommend used to is elliptic curve or Diffie element for your SSL certificates. And again, you can use RSA for SSH, right? So there's something called as a non-repudiation where the sender cannot deny the public. That is, so that can happen better in RS algorithm. I think that is one functionality. Elliptic curve does not do that well because there's a key exchange algorithm, and that process is a bit different, is what I feel. Yeah, but again, it is always the key size. The higher the key size, it is going to be better. Right? If you see elliptic curve 512 or 1024, it provides the same security as RSA 4096 probably, but it will take more time to encrypt and decrypt when you're using that component. But again, the public key encryption is used for initial level only. Most of your old communication is going to be encrypted using AES encryption, right? If probably we can do a cryptography session somewhere in the next cycle where we can look at this, how these algorithms are working in that, right? Because that will take time to explain it in a much more detailed way.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome, Mr.
Okay then, so thank you everyone for joining for our cybersecurity session, and then we are going to move forward for our DevOps session. It is already 24 minutes late. Sorry for Mr. Devashish, and sorry those students who only want to join for DevOps session. I think you are waiting for a couple of minutes, and I saw a few of the chat on the group as well. So thank you for your patience. Thanks a lot, Mr. Karthik. Thanks a lot.
Welcome. Thanks.
And it is a very pleasure for us, and it is good to know all of this technical thing. So yes, Mr. Devashish, I think we can start for our DevOps. I think day 3, right?
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
So it has been a long session with Mr. Karthik, and it was as if like it should not end, but it has, every good thing has to end. Okay, like this has to also end, and something bad is going to start. Like this.
Not like that. Not
Nothing
like
like
that.
Okay, let's see. It is very difficult to pick up the mood of the session when after this fantastic session.